Now, we've looked at a number of valid deductive argument forms, and those are forms where if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. That's what makes the argument valid. There's no possibility for true premises and a false conclusion. So now we're going to look at a couple invalid argument forms that are popular enough, they occur enough that they get their own name and we study them. So these would be arguments where you can have true premises and a false conclusion. All right. And when that can be the case, then the argument's form is flawed. The premises don't render the conclusion necessarily true, as a valid argument would. So the first one we'll look at is called affirming the consequent. And it resembles modus ponens in a bit. So premise one is going to be that conditional statement. If P, then Q. But whereas with modus ponens we affirm the antecedent P, with this fallacy, we're going to affirm the consequent Q. So we're going to say that Q is the case. Okay. And then for the conclusion, we're going to affirm the antecedent P. So this is an invalid argument and a fallacy. Okay. So we would never want to be convinced by an argument with this form because the premises don't guarantee the truth of the conclusion. We can have all true premises and a false conclusion. This is always a possibility with this argument. And I will show you just all you need is one example of that being the case, and you prove that the argument's form is flawed. All right. So let's look at an example of that. If we make P that George Washington was beheaded, so I'll just put Washington was beheaded. And that would be sufficient for George Washington being dead. Okay. So then Washington is dead. And being dead is necessary for being beheaded. All right. So this is a dark and grim example, but it is a conditional that is very clearly true. Okay. If George Washington was beheaded, then George Washington is dead. That's very clearly true. And another thing that is clearly true is that George Washington is dead. Okay. I don't think anyone would, any serious person would question that. So those are clearly true claims. So what I've done here is Washington was beheaded is my P term. Washington is dead is my Q term. And here I have affirmed the consequent. I've affirmed Q. So for my conclusion, I'm going to affirm my antecedent P. Washington was beheaded. And if you know anything about American history of that time, you'll know that that is false. Okay. And so what I've affirmed there is P, my P term. Washington was beheaded. So what I've done here is I've built out an argument using this exact form where the premises are true and the conclusion is false. Okay. And what that means is that using this form here, the premises being true does not guarantee the truth of the conclusion. So it doesn't mean that the conclusions, when an argument has this form, it doesn't mean the conclusion will always be false, but it means that the conclusion is not made true by the premises. If it is true, it's true by luck. It has nothing to do with what the premises gave us. Okay, so even when a conclusion is very clearly true, if the argument has this form, if the reasons giving us that conclusion take this shape, then we wouldn't want to accept the argument, okay, because it has this invalid form. Let me show you an example of that. going back to the other examples we've been considering. So let's consider this. If I attend Clark College, then I attend a Washington school. Okay, we know that that's a true conditional statement. And now I'm going to affirm the consequent. I attend a Washington school. And then I'm going to conclude, I'm going to affirm my antecedent here. I attend Clark College. Now in this case, premise 1 is true, premise 2 is true for you, the Clark College listener, and the conclusion also is true for you, the Clark College listener. All right. So here we have all true claims, a true conclusion, but we still have an invalid argument. You would not want to be convinced by this argument. And why is that? It's because the conclusion is true by chance. It just happens to be the case that you're a Clark College student looking at this argument, and so it happens to be true for you. But suppose that someone from Washington State University is looking at this argument, they're watching this video, then what they would say is, well, yeah, premise 1 is true, premise 2 is true, but I don't attend Clark College. I attend Washington State University, so that's a false claim. And so without changing the argument at all, we find that the premises can remain true, but the conclusion is, true or false just depending on who watches it, which is something that is irrelevant to what the premises are talking about. So the conclusion being true is going to be a matter of luck. It's not true by necessity. It's not true because these premises are true. The premises allow for the possibility of the conclusion being false, even when they are themselves true. And so that makes this argument invalid in its form. And then by definition, no matter what, whether it's a WSU student watching or it is a Clark College student watching, where it's true, an invalid argument is by definition unsound, and we would not want to be convinced by an argument like this.